We've all heard our fair share of conspiracy theories. Some are innocent, like the one claiming Elvis is still alive, while others are sinister, like the one claiming 9/11 was orchestrated by the US government. It's easy to dismiss such theories as nothing more than ramblings of crazy people. But don't be so hasty. Just because something is a conspiracy doesn't necessarily mean it's untrue. It's the granddaddy of all conspiracy theories. The government is beaming secret messages into your brain to control your thinking. It's the kind of strange allegation that would get you labeled as neurotic if you dared to mention it. No, just ask Donald Friedman, a guy who in 2003 requested that exact information from the FBI. He was declared mentally ill by his psychiatrist as well as the government. But here's the thing. He was kinda right. In a 2006 declassified Pentagon report called Bioeffects of Selected Non-Lethal Weapons, the phenomenon of microwave hearing was laid out, including how the technology in its most basic form could be used to communicate with individuals through Morse code. It might be a good idea to keep that tinfoil hat on. It might not be so absurd after all. This conspiracy isn't just a theory that crazy people in their basements believe. This is one believed by an entire town. The town is Shingo, a town in Japan that claims it's home to the final resting place of Jesus Christ. It's frequented by locals to come and take pictures of and have a picnic. It's less of a worship place and more of a local gathering place to have a nice afternoon. The basis of this theory is that Christ had visited Japan and studied under a priest at Mount Fuji. When he returned to his homeland, he preached his teachings. When things didn't go well and was going to be put to the cross, his identical brother named Isukiri kindly offered to take the place of his brother on the cross. Jesus then fled to Japan, where he settled down, had a wife, a family, and eventually died. The site is run by the proposed descendants of Christ himself. I didn't go there on my trip to Japan. You've probably flown through plenty of airports, but Denver International? That's a whole different story. Some people believe that beneath its massive runways lies a hidden world, underground bunkers for the elite, or even something more alien. The airport's unusual murals, Masonic symbols, and bizarre budget overruns certainly add to the suspicion. But here's the part that makes you wonder. The airport is nearly twice the size of Manhattan, way more space than a typical airport needs, and workers have reported tunnels that don't seem to connect to any visible facilities. Plus, 5 buildings that were constructed incorrectly weren't demolished. They were buried underground. Why? There are just too many red flags. Herb Stempel was reigning champion on the quiz show 21 back in the 50s. What viewers didn't know was that the program was rigged, and Stempel knew the answers in advance. Unfortunately for him, his sweet ride didn't last forever. When producers recruited the charismatic player Charles Van Doren for the game, Stempel was asked to take a dive in favor of a new champion. He agreed, but it was only a matter of time before the cover was blown on the conspiracy. A congressional committee helped expose the truth, and TV was never the same again. You may remember the movie about this story from 1994, Quiz Show. Ralph Fiennes starred as Van Doren and John Turturro played Stempel. Beginning in the early 1950s, the CIA initiative known as Operation Mockingbird eavesdropped on members of the Washington Press Corps. They paid journalists to disseminate CIA propaganda as part of this program, wiretapped their phones, and monitored their workspaces to keep tabs on their daily operations and visitors' behavior. The CIA also went so far as to pay students in cultural organizations and magazines to act as front groups. Senate hearings in the mid-1970s finally exposed the covert initiative. This theory, while pretty out there, is actually kind of interesting. The theory began to get around after some hieroglyphics were uncovered depicting a tall, lizard-like creature helping workers lift stones for the pyramids in Giza. The lizard-like creatures in question are actually depicting serpopards, a mythical animal that's depicted as a cross between a leopard and a snake, having a long curvy neck and a leopard head. It appears in many other Egyptian artifacts and writings. While some believe that this is what the Egyptians believed dinosaurs to look like, many took the images literally and thought that dinosaurs were walking around ancient Egypt. This theory was given further thought and support when a small raptor fossil was discovered buried in a small chamber in the pyramids. Imagine if one of the Beatles wasn't who we thought he was. That's the theory with Paul McCartney, that he died in 1966 and was quietly replaced by a lookalike. Fans point to bizarre clues like Paul walking barefoot on the Abbey Road album cover, something that supposedly symbolizes death. But there's more. Lyrics that, when played in reverse, allegedly say Paul is dead. Now here's what gives this theory legs. Forensic experts have studied photos of McCartney from before and after 1966, claiming they see definite differences in his facial structure. And a 2009 Italian study even found discrepancies in the voice prints of McCartney's pre- and post-1966 recordings. It's not definitive proof, but if juries believe these experts in courts, who are we to deny their evidence? So, what was the deal with Ellen's puppy? There wasn't one. The actual storyline of Ellen's The Puppy episode focused on the main character acknowledging her sexuality, so the producers were part of a conspiracy. Back in 1997, this was a big deal and confirmed the rumors about her private life. It's fascinating and a little weird to read the Peabody Award website's commentary on the episode at the time. They stated that by giving the episode an award, they were, quote, neither endorsing the sexuality of Miss DeGeneres nor taking sides in the debate on how these issues were presented in the media. The Dalai Lama can always be found smiling. Some have wondered if his smiles have to do with the fact that he earned a six-figure salary from the US government in the 1960s. As per declassified intelligence reports, he earned $180,000 as part of the CIA's funding of the Tibetan resistance at a sweet $1.7 million per year. The objective behind these payments was to interfere with and destabilize China's infrastructure. In 1998, the Dalai Lama's administration admitted to receiving these monies from the CIA. For decades, there has been a rumor that in the atmosphere there is a Soviet-Russian-made device designed to weaponize the weather, and if the mere idea of that weren't enough to drive you mad, well then get ready for what this weatherman believes. An Idaho native weatherman by the name of Scott Stevens went on record claiming that the Yakuza, the Japanese mafia, somehow got control of this device and were using it against the US to create catastrophic weather events. He believes that they caused Hurricane Katrina and would use it again later that same year. He says that he saw irregularities in weather patterns above Montana, and that was all he needed to believe this. The weather station that he was employed at kept him on staff, so no doubt he has access to spread his misguided ideas still. What if Big Pharma isn't just about treating illnesses, but about making sure they never fully go away? The theory suggests pharmaceutical companies already have cures for diseases like cancer, but keep them hidden to continue profiting from expensive, ongoing treatments. Why could this be true? In 2015, Turing Pharmaceuticals infamously raised the price of Diaprim from $13.50 to $750 per pill. Questcor raised the price of Acthar gel from $40 to $23,000, and Valiant spiked the price of the diabetes drug Glumetza from $800 to over $10,000 for a 90-day supply. Even Mylan doubled the price of EpiPens. And here's the thing. A lot of the money Big Pharma spends goes into developing treatments that patients need to take for years, not one-time cures. In 2014, they spent $89 billion on R&D, but much of that was funneled into developing drugs that keep patients coming back for more. It's one of the most grueling reality shows on television. However, is Survivor as tough as it looks? Probably not, according to some reports. There are stories of body doubles and contestants being given time to work out strategies before they film the challenges. With various rumors out there, what is the actual truth? Survivor appears to be a mix of both reality and fiction. The competitors have a rough time, yet producers manufacture what happens to them to a certain extent. No, I'm not talking about COVID. Yet. However, there might be something to that conspiracy theory too. As early as 1932, the U.S. Public Health Service collaborated with the Tuskegee Institute on a phony syphilis treatment program. The experiment, which involved lying to over 400 African American men with syphilis, was only scheduled to last 6 months at first. However, it took until 1972 for the public to become aware of the research, at which point the government was forced to terminate the experiment. For 40 years, the 400 men were frequently given harmful drugs and subjected to painful and unneeded medical procedures in the name of medicine. Despite the fact that penicillin became a known cure for syphilis, researchers hid this information from patients in order to keep the experiment going. The island of Bermeja used to be on a number of maps until there was an oil drilling dispute between Mexico and the US around 2008. As it turns out, the island of Bermeja was actually a phantom island. If you didn't know, phantom islands are islands that would appear on cartography maps for years, even centuries at a time, and then one day would just no longer be there, due to either shifting sea levels or just navigational mistakes. While because the discovery resulted in the US getting massive economic and resource gains, there were some that claimed that the CIA secretly destroyed the shoreline of the island to let it be swallowed by the ocean. They have absolutely zero proof of this, but they're still pretty certain. What if you weren't actually living in the year 2024? That's the mind-bending idea behind the phantom time hypothesis, which claims that about 300 years of history, specifically between 614 and 911 CE, were entirely fabricated. Now here's the really strange part. When you start digging into the evidence, or rather the lack of it, it gets a little eerie. Archaeologists and historians have long noted that there's surprisingly little physical or written evidence from this period. Key developments in architecture seem to leap forward with no real transition. Romanesque styles appear out of nowhere, while earlier periods seem oddly quiet. Another puzzling aspect is the mismatch between historical records from different parts of the world. For example, in Europe, there's little to no documentation of the Byzantine Empire or Islamic expansions during this phantom period. Some historians have even pointed out that events supposedly happening at the same time in different regions don't seem to align when you cross-reference the timelines. When the character of Susan was killed off on Seinfeld, viewers were shocked. Her sudden exit at the end of season 7 was bizarre and hilarious. As you may recall, she died after licking the toxic glue on cheap wedding invitation envelopes. Why did she leave? Well, it wasn't her decision. Naturally, there were conspiracy theories about the situation, which culminated with actress Heidi Swedberg discovering she was let go due to a supposed lack of chemistry with the cast. Seinfeld's Jason Alexander, who revealed the information in an interview, would go on to make a public apology to Swedberg over the move. Conspiracy theories can be highly entertaining, until they turn out to be true. Following the nuclear bombings in Japan, the US launched a large study to assess the impact of nuclear fallout on the human body. To do this, the government stole dead bodies. Yes, the dead bodies of babies and young children. The main reason was that they needed young tissue, so they enlisted a global network of agents to locate recently deceased newborns and children, and then retrieve samples, sometimes even limbs, without notifying or obtaining consent from the hundreds of grieving families. There are a couple of conspiracies surrounding the Beatles, but this one is kinda crazy. This theory claims that the Beatles were invented by the Tavistock Institute in London, and that all of the songs were actually written by Theo Adorno. In fact, the theory goes on to even claim that the Tavistock Institute was responsible for the entire rock and roll British invasion of the 60s. The idea was that they invented multiple different rock and roll bands to implement social and cultural change. In 1963, President John F. Kennedy was assassinated in an event that continues to spark controversy. While the official story pins Lee Harvey Oswald as the lone gunman, many suspect the CIA played a role. Kennedy had ruffled feathers within the agency, especially after threatening to curb their influence during the Cold War. Things get more suspicious in 1978 when the House Select Committee on Assassinations concluded that JFK was, quote, probably assassinated as a result of a conspiracy, and hinted at a second shooter. They also found major issues in the original investigation. Missing evidence and altered records only deepened the mystery. Plus, we know for a fact that the CIA was involved in plots to assassinate Fidel Castro, proving they weren't afraid of political killings. With key documents still classified, it's no surprise this theory has credibility. Stranger Things is one of Netflix's biggest hits, and one of the reasons for that is its complex backstory. Back when it started, however, not much was known about the characters and their connections to the crazy events of the series. Fans figured the superpowers displayed by Millie Bobby Brown's character Eleven were linked to the freaky parallel world of the Upside Down. To their excitement, their theories were proved correct as the show went on. Alcohol producers have been combining their products with dangerous chemicals for a long time. However, between 1926 and 1933, the federal government pushed manufacturers to add higher doses of these chemicals to their products to deter bootleggers from turning the liquor into moonshine. Unfortunately, that did not discourage the bootleggers or those who bought their goods. By the end of Prohibition, over 10,000 Americans had died due to tainted liquor. Conspiracy theorists really have a strange fixation on the moon, don't they? This moon theory is a lot more convoluted than the fake moon landing theory. This one claims that the craters on the moon are actually evidence of the government's bombing of the moon to wipe out an alien race. Amazingly, this alien race lives on the dark side of the moon. You know, the side we can't see. This theory was given some credit in the conspiracy theorist community when Air Force Tactical Air Command technician Carl Wolf provided some plausibility to the idea. He said, There were structures that were definitely not created by natural means, such as meteors or ancient collisions with other heavenly bodies. Now, people believe there's a secret war on an alien race living on the dark side of the moon. So, thanks for that, Carl. The stigma attached to UFOs has changed over the years. In 2021, the Pentagon released a report on UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena, revealing that they've been tracking these mysterious objects for years. What's shocking is that many of these sightings by credible witnesses, pilots and military personnel, remain unexplained. Crafts moving at impossible speeds and performing maneuvers that defy the laws of physics. Then, in 2023, former U.S. intelligence officer David Grush testified that the U.S. government has been hiding the existence of alien spacecraft for decades. He claimed that not only had they recovered crashed UFOs, but they'd also found non-human biologics at crash sites. With officials admitting they don't know what these objects are, and whistleblowers revealing shocking information under oath, it's hard not to wonder what's really being kept from the public. The good times ended for actor John Amos when he left the sitcom of the same name in the mid-70s. He'd been a much-loved character, having originated the role in comedy series Maude. Family man James Evans was killed off in a car accident. So far, so unfunny. It certainly wasn't a joke to Amos, who, contrary to official reports, was fired for complaining about the creative team's approach to depicting African Americans. Yikes. Some of the world's most influential and wealthiest men congregate at a California campground for 2 weeks of heavy drinking, top-secret discussions, and bizarre rituals every July. Visitors to the Bohemian Grove retreat have included renowned corporate leaders, U.S. presidents, artists, and oil tycoons. It's said that participants are not permitted to conduct business there. Still, there has been an exception or two, most notably in 1942 for the Manhattan Project, when the discussions and approvals led to the development of the atomic bomb. This theory is the twisting of a plan that the UN actually has called Agenda 21. Agenda 21, in actuality, is a plan the UN is working on to control climate change and use more sustainable resources. But conspiracy theorists think it's something much more sinister. There are those that believe the UN is actually just a puppet for the Illuminati, and that the Agenda 21 is actually a plan to take over the world and create a singular global government. They believe that the UN's plan is to lower the world's population to just 500 million people, and that they'll be used as slave labor, and the rest of the population will be completely wiped out. They also believe this plan will be enacted by 2030, so I guess the UN, better get on it. What if we had the ability to control weather patterns, or in the process stopping droughts or hurricanes, or, on the flip side, cause them? According to some conspiracy theorists, the government can do just that. The theory suggests that programs like HAARP, a high-frequency active auroral research program, which studies the ionosphere, could be used to manipulate weather. Here's what makes this theory interesting. HAARP does exist, and while it's officially described as a research program for improving communication systems, some suspect it has far more powerful capabilities. In fact, governments around the world have been studying ways to modify weather for decades. For example, during the Vietnam War, the US used cloud seeding to extend monsoon seasons and disrupt enemy movements. The fact that weather manipulation is possible on some level makes this conspiracy harder to dismiss. Cash cab is an attention-grabbing concept for a game show. Is it genuine? Well, kinda. The central idea of a passenger taking a taxi ride only to find themselves in the middle of a TV quiz isn't all that it seems. Some of the riders are real fares, whilst others are aware they're going to be on a show. Just not this one. Also, if you've ever wondered about the money they win, it's fake. Plus, they have to tax the amount the contestants receive. The president, or the first lady in question, was Edith Wilson. President Wilson had a crippling stroke near the conclusion of his presidency, but the government felt it was in the country's best interest to keep, the news quiet. As such, his wife, Edith Wilson, made the vast majority of executive decisions for several months. Despite Mrs. Wilson's claim that she simply served as a steward, historians who have studied the Wilson presidency concur that Mrs. Wilson was essentially president for much over a year, and that she didn't do too badly. Actually, some interesting research that NASA is doing to find a proposed ninth planet in our solar system. Sorry, Pluto. The ninth planet is said to be about the size of Neptune and orbits somewhere in the Kuiper Belt past Neptune. The astronomy community is actively searching for this planet and would love to find it. The more crazy theory behind this planet is that when it gets too close to Earth, it pushes asteroids towards us and kills all of us on the planet. The people who believe this also believe that it was this planet that was responsible for killing the dinosaurs. The ones that helped build the pyramids in Egypt. Astronomers have had to go on record saying that this theorized planet, if actually found, poses absolutely no threat to the planet Earth. This theory needs no explanation. It must be one of the best known out there. So, what are the facts? For one, there are the peculiarities in the photos and the videos. Shadows appear to fall in different directions, as if multiple light sources were used, something that wouldn't happen if the sun were the only source of light. Then there's the iconic American flag planted on the moon, which appears to ripple in the wind, even though there's no atmosphere or wind on the moon. Adding fuel to the fire, former NASA engineer Bill Kaysing, in his 1976 book, We Never Went to the Moon, suggests that the technology at the time wasn't advanced enough to guarantee a safe landing and return. Kaysing pointed out that in the lead-up to Apollo 11, NASA had a 1 in 10 chance of success, making a fake landing seem plausible to save face on the world stage. And then in 2009, NASA admitted they had lost the original footage of the moon landing. Peculiar, right? Michael Larson is either a sneak or a genius, depending on how you look at it. He won over $100,000 on the game show Press Your Luck in 1984. What was his secret? He definitely had one, and as it turned out, the conspiracy theorists in the audience were proved right. Larson analyzed the workings of the show's game board, finding he could accurately predict the outcome. It was a sneaky, but perfectly legitimate way of beating the board at its own game. The 1950s were a scary time for US citizens. The government grappled with communist spies as the Cold War was heating up, and those in power decided that drastic measures were in order. It was during this time that Project MKUltra was born. In order to find a truth serum, the CIA decided to secretly inject unwitting US and Canadian individuals with LSD and then interrogate and occasionally torture the subjects. The CIA reimbursed hospitals, jails, and colleges for cooperation and silence. In 1973, CIA Director Richard Helms ordered the destruction of all MKUltra related records, and while the plot was finally exposed, no one participating in the operation remembered the specifics. Exiled philosopher Hubert Humdinger once claimed at a dinner party that the reason why Queen Elizabeth II was living so long must have been because she was a cannibal. No one really paid much attention to him, until he published an article in We Royalty magazine trying to convince people of his belief. He stated, "She must eat human flesh. To be so vivacious, there is an immense amount of spiritual energy in human muscle." He lost pretty much all his credibility after the article was published, but the theory picked up some traction in the conspiracy theory community when a worker was given clearance to check for electrical problems. He claimed he discovered a freezer containing human remains. When 5G started rolling out, the internet exploded with claims that it could cause serious health problems like cancer and even contribute to the spread of COVID-19. That sounds extreme, right? But here's why people are still worried. Back in 2011, the World Health Organization classified electromagnetic radiation from wireless devices as possibly carcinogenic, which made people nervous about 5G's higher frequency waves. Unlike older networks, 5G uses millimeter waves that penetrate the skin more deeply, which some argue could have unknown biological effects. In fact, over 250 scientists from 40 different countries signed a petition in 2020 urging the UN to slow down on 5G until more research is done. So while many experts claim 5G is safe, the lack of definite research leaves a gap big enough for some serious doubt. Viewers of the UK game show Who Wants to Be a Millionaire in 2001 might have noticed the sound of coughing in the audience. Google. Interestingly, this coughing came from spectator Diana Ingram, who just so happened to be married to the guy answering questions that night. Major Charles Ingram famously deceived producers by having Diana cough when the right answer came up. Also taking the part in the conspiracy was contestant Tequin Whittock, who coughed his way to notoriety. Major Ingram won the £1 million, but the plot was later exposed. From the CIA to the FBI. When the FBI wasn't investigating crimes, the Bureau, led by J. Edgar Hoover, spent most of its time trying to keep communism from spreading in the US. The FBI hounded various political groups, such as the Civil Rights Movement, through a secret program known as COINTELPRO, Counterintelligence Program. Dr. Martin Luther King was public enemy number 1. Agents bugged his hotel rooms, stalked him, attempted to break up his marriage, and even wrote him an anonymous letter pushing him to commit suicide at one point. One started as a Reddit joke and spiraled into a belief. A user on Reddit made ridiculous claims that Finland wasn't actually there. It stated that Finland was actually a fabricated nation by Russia and Japan designed to secure fishing rights back in 1917. The guy went to great lengths to back up the theory and used real-world fishing routes and business dealings. While the internet went crazy and made it into a viral meme, some took the idea to heart. Although the original Reddit poster admitted it was a joke, there were a few that truly believe that Finland is in actuality just a vast spread of ocean water. You know what? Hold on. Let me check. Yeah, no, it's still there on satellite images, but you know what? Let's be honest. The people that believe that hoax probably thinks satellite images are hoaxes too, so yay. What's up, Finland? I found Finland. Newfoundland. That's a geography pun. We all know the story. The RMS Titanic struck an iceberg in 1912 and sank. But what if the ship that went down wasn't the Titanic at all? Some people believe it was actually her sister ship, the RMS Olympic, all in a bid to collect insurance money. Here's the reasoning. The Olympic had been damaged in a previous accident and was nearly identical to the Titanic. Some theorists believe the ships were swapped, with the damaged Olympic being sent out under the guise of the Titanic. So they supposedly sent the Titanic on its fateful voyage, knowing it would sink, to collect the insurance payout. Suspicious? Some point to irregularities. Survivors claim the ship's insurance was increased just before its maiden voyage, and many high-profile passengers canceled their tickets at the last minute, including J.P. Morgan, who owned White Star Line. Morgan withdrew right before the voyage. TV show Pawn Stars has kept audiences entertained for years, but are producers selling the audiences a lie? No, it's all pretty real, though the action you see on screen isn't exactly spontaneous. To guarantee a good show, certain elements have to be in place beforehand, otherwise you might be stuck with a boring guest or a less than compelling collectible. One of the biggest surprises about Pawn Stars is the Las Vegas shop itself. They actually filmed sections of the reality series on a set. Crazy celebrity conspiracy theories are always entertaining, and this one was quite true. In the same way as many other counterculture heroes, John Lennon was seen as a threat. To fuel the fire, his anti-war songs like Give Peace a Chance didn't endear him to the Nixon administration. The FBI decided to place Lennon under surveillance in 1971, and the Immigration and Naturalization Service attempted to deport him a year later. I won't discuss the conspiracy theories surrounding his assassination just yet. This theory is loaded, so get ready. There are many tragedies that tend to happen in the month of April, and there are people who believe that this is because of April being a sacrifice month for many cults and religions across the history of civilization. That lone idea isn't too far-fetched, given the history that April has had being the month that a lot of cults perform sacrifice rites, specifically the cult of Baal, the sun god. The harder to believe aspect of this theory is that the big violent tragedies like gun violence, wildfires, killings, and many more are performed by the government who is secretly being controlled by the cult of Baal. What if I told you there's a 13,000-year-old alien satellite quietly orbiting Earth, keeping an eye on us? It's known as the Black Knight satellite, and the theory has been around for decades. It all kicked off in the 50s when UFO researcher Donald Keyhoe claimed that the US Air Force had spotted two mysterious objects in orbit, years before we launched any human-made satellites. Then in the 60s, ham radio operators started picking up bizarre signals from space, and some believed they were coming from the Black Knight trying to send us a message. Then in 1998, things got even stranger. During NASA's STS-88 space shuttle mission, a photo came out showing a dark, odd-shaped object orbiting Earth. NASA shrugged it off as a thermal blanket lost during the mission, but to a lot of people, it didn't look like space debris at all. For now, the STS-88 images have been absorbed into a growing body of evidence that there might be more to NASA's space debris. Some fans of Grey's Anatomy think the show hasn't been the same since Patrick Dempsey left. The chiseled heartthrob played the role of Dr. Derek Shepherd, who was tragically killed in a car crash in season 11. Whenever a popular star exits a hit series, there are conspiracy theories concerning what happened. According to the behind-the-scenes book, How to Save a Life, Dempsey was causing trouble on the set, clashing with creator Shonda Rhimes and allegedly giving team members PTSD with his behavior. Following the Watergate crisis in 1975, Senator Frank Church helped establish the predecessor of the U.S. Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. Known as the Church Committee, their objective was to investigate the CIA and FBI to guarantee they were working within the law. The committee swiftly determined that the CIA had essentially gone into the hitman business. In addition to assassinating Mossadegh and Allende in Iran, the CIA also killed revolutionaries and rebel leaders in Central and South America, the Middle East, and Africa. They disguise their murders as car crashes, suicides, diseases, and heart attacks. Ah yes, everyone's favorite conspiracy theorist loon, Alex Jones. Thankfully, he's fallen out of favor with a lot of the right-wing media channels that used to give him screen time, mostly due to theories like this one. During one of his patented rants, he claimed that the chemicals put into tap water were turning people gay in what he quoted was a gay bomb. Not only did he claim that the water was turning people gay, but he also claimed that it was turning frogs gay. Alex Jones, ladies and gentlemen. According to this theory, devices capable of generating unlimited clean energy already exist, but they're being kept under wraps to protect the profits of industries like big oil. One of the key figures tied to this theory is Nikola Tesla. In the early 1900s, Tesla was known for his groundbreaking ideas about wireless energy transmission, and some believe he invented a device that could provide free electricity to the entire world. But when he died in 1943, the FBI confiscated his papers, and what was inside them remained a mystery. There's also the case of Stanley Meyer, an inventor who, in the 90s, claimed he had developed a car that could run on water. Meyer's invention, if real, would have rendered gasoline obsolete. But after showcasing his water-powered car, Meyer suddenly died, and his invention never surfaced again. We might not have definite proof yet, but the secrecy surrounding Tesla's work and Meyer's sudden death leaves enough room for suspicion. If even a fraction of these claims are true, the impact on the world's energy industries and our daily lives would be nothing short of revolutionary. The house hunter couples bought their house before the show was filmed? This wild conspiracy theory turned out to be built on solid foundations. In fact, the information supporting these theories came straight from the people who worked on the show. So next time you're watching those lucky people working out which property to buy, remember that they're probably faking it. Unfortunately, this one is 100% true. Thanks to the Twitter files, we also know they can find themselves in delicate situations if they meddle too much. The Electronic Frontier Foundation, or EFF, is a nonprofit that advises the public on all online safety matters and defends civil liberties in the digital world. Thanks to their efforts, we know how many user data requests our government agencies send to the most prominent platforms every year. In 2016 alone, there were over 49,868 requests for data to Mark Zuckerberg's Facebook, 9,076 to Apple, and 27,850 to Google. The Large Hadron Collider is a particle accelerator that was placed at the Swiss-France border near Geneva. When they initially started running the collider, there were theorists that believed that once it was activated, it would create a black hole and swallow the entire planet. While in theory it'd be scientifically possible, scientists claim you need an accelerator the size of the universe to do so. After a 3-year-long hiatus, when the accelerator was undergoing repairs and maintenance, it was approved to start running again. Not long after it started up, there were people coming out of the woodwork on social media once again claiming that a black hole was imminent, but some went even further, claiming that they were opening up a portal to another dimension, or a portal to hell. The scientists in charge have gone on record once again stating the impossibility of that happening. The idea that fluoride is added to our drinking water for population control may sound extreme, but there are enough curious facts behind this theory to make you pause. Water fluoridation began in the 40s, allegedly to improve dental health, but fluoride is classified as a neurotoxin by the Lancet Neurology Journal, similar to lead and mercury. Studies have linked high fluoride exposure to cognitive decline, including a 2019 study in JAMA Pediatrics that found children exposed to fluoride in the womb had lower IQs. Harvard research also suggests high fluoride levels may impair cognitive development in children. Add that to the rumors from the Cold War, where it was said the Soviets and Nazis used fluoride to keep prisoners passive, and the theory starts to sound a lot less far-fetched. Actor Jeffrey DeMunn wasn't the longest surviving cast member of The Walking Dead. In fact, he lasted just 2 seasons out of the 11 which were finally produced. DeMunn's exit from the series sparked conspiracy theories due to the fact that his characters seemed to have more to give. Showrunner Frank Darabont had left on bad terms, and naturally people figured that was a factor behind DeMunn's decision because they'd worked together previously. It took a while for DeMunn to reveal exactly why he went, and sure enough, it turned out he was showing solidarity with his colleague. During the 80s, it would have been almost impossible to find an action movie where the main character didn't have a cigarette hanging out of his mouth for 60% of the duration. Many believe the rise in cancers of the throat, mouth, and lungs could be attributed to cigarettes. In fact, although research showed an undeniable statistical link between lung cancer and smoking as early as the 1950s, it wasn't until the late 90s that Philip Morris, the nation's largest cigarette manufacturer at the time, officially confirmed that smoking could cause cancer. So if you didn't know, around the time of the Cold War, state officials started putting fluoride in municipal water supplies in an effort to combat tooth decay. Many places still do this, by the way. Now, because of the fear and paranoia around communism at the time, people began to believe that the fluoridation of our water supply was actually a communist plot to poison our water. There are people that still believe this, so it's not just a product of the time. Now, you may be asking, what would communists have to gain from putting fluoride in our water supply? Why would people believe that communists put fluoride in our water in the first place? Well, the answer is quite simple. Delusion. For years, some have believed that the Food and Drug Administration, along with major pharmaceutical companies, is intentionally suppressing natural cures for diseases to protect their profits. The theory suggests that inexpensive natural remedies for serious conditions like cancer are being kept from the public because they can't be patented and monetized like pharmaceutical drugs. Several natural treatments have shown promise only to be dismissed or heavily regulated by the FDA. Take cannabis, for example, classified as a Schedule I drug for decades. It was said to have had no medical value, but today cannabis-based treatments are widely used for chronic pain and epilepsy. Then there's the late trial controversy, a compound from apricot pits promoted in the 70s as a natural cancer treatment. Despite anecdotal success, the FDA banned it, calling it ineffective and toxic. At some point, you have to stop and ask, why? The Cosby Show, one of the most iconic sitcoms in US TV history, suffered a major blow to its image when Bill Cosby was convicted of sexual assault in 2018. The show itself had finished in 1992, though the stories about Cosby were nothing new. Allegations against the comedian and actor were made back in 2005. Cosby has denied any wrongdoing, though he has admitted using sedatives on women. His legal team had the conviction overturned in 2021, but the controversy surrounding him continues. This means the conspiracy theories about him will also continue. Today we know this is virtually always true, and never more so than on August 2nd, 1964, when they manipulated the Gulf of Tonkin incident, which led to full US involvement in the Vietnam War. The facts surrounding the North Vietnamese attack on the American naval ship Maddox were already hazy by the time news of the alleged strike reached American shores. Since then, declassified intelligence documents have revealed that the Maddox provided support for South Vietnamese attacks on a nearby island, and the North Vietnamese responded in kind. A bit of background for this one first. If you weren't aware, there's a program run by the US Air Force and Navy called HAARP, H-A-A-R-P, that does experiments in the upper atmosphere to track radio waves that interfere with communication and navigation down on Earth. Because of this program, people have believed that the HAARP is able to manipulate the Earth's weather. If that weren't ridiculous enough, people believed that the then President Barack Obama used this program to manufacture Hurricane Sandy a week before his re-election in an attempt to gain support, stating, "The established media will naturally provide all the propaganda Obama needs to sweep the election on Tuesday, November 6th, a week after the hurricane is projected to hit." According to this theory, the Federal Reserve is controlled by a small group of wealthy elites and bankers who use it to manipulate the economy for their own benefit rather than serving the public good. What raises eyebrows is that while the president appoints the boards of governors, the Federal Reserve doesn't answer directly to the public, Congress, or any governmental body in the way other departments do. Supporters of the theory also note that private banks own shares in the Federal Reserve System's 12 regional banks, which strengthens the idea that it could be influenced by those with banking interests. It's almost obvious that these private shareholders profit from the Fed's decisions, especially through the control of interest rates and money supply, which can have massive effects on the economy. So, even if the Federal Reserve claims to serve the public, its complex and opaque structure gives a lot of room for interested parties to maneuver. The Last of Us may be an acclaimed TV series, but it's also an iconic game. This can lead to gaps in people's knowledge, because games don't always provide the level of detail regarding story that TV dramas do. HBO's version of The Last of Us revealed that Ellie was immune to the devastating infection due to her mother being bit with a cordyceps fungus before she was born. This gave a reasonably convincing medical reason for her immunity, confirming fan speculation in the process. The truth is often stranger than fiction. It really happened. The Canadian government employed a university professor in the 60s to create a method for detecting homosexuality in the federal workforce. he invented a device that detected pupil dilation in response to same-sex erotic pictures. The Canadian government used the results obtained from the device to fire over 400 men from public service, the Mounties, and the military. Alex Jones is back to say some horrible false theories again. So this happened within hours of the Sandy Hook shootings in 2012. He began saying that the whole thing was a government-fabricated hoax. He claimed the victims' families were lying and that the children who were killed were actually alive. His supporters then bombarded the families with harassment, including death threats. The families that were harassed sued Jones and his company InfoWars for defamation. Thankfully, Jones recently lost the case and was forced to pay almost $1.5 million in damages to the families. While the official narrative is that COVID-19 originated in a wet market in Wuhan, China, some believe that the virus was engineered in a lab and either accidentally or deliberately released into the population. The Wuhan Institute of Virology was known to be researching coronaviruses in bats, the very type of virus that led to the COVID-19 pandemic. What's more, a number of scientists have pointed out that the virus's genetic makeup includes certain characteristics that are unusual for a naturally occurring virus. For example, the furin cleavage site, which allows the virus to infect human cells more easily, has sparked debate over whether this feature could have been added in a lab. In 2021, the US intelligence community released a report that couldn't definitively rule out a lab break. And while no hard evidence has been presented to prove the virus was man-made, the proximity of the outbreak to a research facility studying similar viruses keeps this theory feeling very plausible. Cheers is a beloved sitcom, but it had a dark side. Specifically, the situation between series regular Rhea Perlman and actor Jay Thomas, who played her on-screen husband. Perlman's character Carlo was known for her tough attitude, and it turned out the actress herself shared the same qualities. When Thomas insulted her appearance in an interview, she had him thrown off the show like a drunk out of a bar. Also, the character didn't just leave. He was killed by an ice resurfacer. Cheers producers originally stated that the audience objected to Carlo being married, which didn't convince fans. Their theories about a behind-the-scenes beef proved to be correct. Unfortunately, such a scheme existed. Operation Northwoods was a deliberate strategy to carry out terrorist acts on US soil. If it doesn't sound bad enough, the plans were approved by the CIA, the Department of Defense, the Pentagon's top brass, and the Joint Chiefs of Staff. If carried out, it would have resulted in the murder of hundreds of innocent individuals to convince the public to support a war against Cuba. The organization even contemplated blowing up a US ship and kidnapping planes as a false pretext for war. Fortunately, John F. Kennedy, president at the time, stopped the planned action. The phantom time hypothesis theory is the theory that the years from 641 to 911 CE never really happened. It was a German historian by the name of Herbert Illig that devised this theory, all based on the idea that Pope Sylvester II, Holy Roman Emperor Otto III, and Byzantine Emperor Constantine VII changed the historical calendar from 1996 CE to 1000 CE in an effort to make Otto III's reign seem longer and more important. He claims that the evidence behind this is the lack of archaeological finds during this period of time and sole reliance on written history. He claims that they fabricated historical documents for this gap in time, invented a fake ruler by the name of Charlemagne, yes, that one, and that through all of this historical tampering, an extra 297 years was added onto history. Illig has found supporters to this theory, and not just crazed loons in their basements. There are other historians who believe in this theory. When Malaysia Airlines flight MH370 vanished in 2014, it left behind one of the biggest aviation mysteries ever. While the official explanation suggests it crashed into the Indian Ocean, some believe the plane was hijacked, and there are a few reasons why this theory sticks around. For one, the plane veered sharply off its planned route and continued flying for hours in the wrong direction. That kind of move is rare in mechanical failures. On top of that, the transponder, which tracks the plane's location, was manually switched off, something that doesn't happen by accident. Then there's the fact that no distress signal was ever sent. This could mean the crew was unable to communicate or had been incapacitated. Yet the flight kept sending satellite data for hours after it disappeared from radar, showing it was still flying long after contact was lost. With no wreckage ever definitively found and the strange circumstances surrounding its disappearance, it's easy to see why the hijacking theory hasn't been ruled out. British DJ and host Jimmy Savile was a familiar face on BBC shows. However, a horrifying truth about him emerged in 2012. Savile, who by that time was deceased, had been abusing vulnerable people, including many children, for decades. Accusations were made that the BBC covered up the story in previous years. Inquiries and investigations carried out both internally and by police reached mixed conclusions. It's certainly true that there were missed opportunities, and some have alleged that BBC management knew about the crimes and chose to do nothing, despite long-standing rumors concerning Seville's conduct. In 2023, the BBC made a drama about the story called The Reckoning, which starred Steve Coogan as Seville. In 1990, in the months running up to the Gulf War, a young girl known only as Naira testified about Iraqi crimes before the Congressional Human Rights Caucus. She told several tall tales about how the invading Iraqis treated Kuwaitis, horrifying Congress members. Although many people died due to Iraq's invasion, her statement was 100% made up. She was the ambassador's daughter to the United States, and her statement was part of a public relations campaign named Citizens for a Free Kuwait, organized by the public relations firm Hill and Knowlton. Like some sort of anti-Semitic version of Journey to the Center of the Earth, people actually believe that Nazis, including Hitler, traveled to the center of the Earth and still live there to this day. The belief is that the center of the Earth contains an extremely powerful natural resource called viral, and that Hitler wanted to harness its power. Now, the whole viral or viral thing comes from a novel written by Edward Bulwer Lytton, the same guy that coined the phrase, "The pen is mightier than the sword," and "'twas a dark and stormy night." The novel goes on to suggest that the center of the Earth is hollow, and that the Aryan Nazis came from the center of the Earth, and that they still live there. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. Well, somebody did, but we don't have the slightest clue as to why. The Vatican, home to the Pope and the center of the Catholic Church, is shrouded in mystery. But some believe the Vatican is hiding more than just religious artifacts. According to conspiracy theorists, the Vatican's secret archives contain ancient texts and knowledge that, if revealed, could change our understanding of history, religion, and even science. For starters, the Vatican is incredibly secretive about its archives. This secrecy has fueled speculation that there's something in those vaults the world isn't supposed to know. Some believe the archives could even contain evidence of extraterrestrial life, ancient religious texts that contradict the Bible, or even documentation that proves Jesus Christ's existence, or disproves it. In 2012, documents were leaked from the Vatican in a scandal known as VatiLeaks, revealing corruption and power struggles within the church. While the leaked documents weren't groundbreaking, they did expose the Vatican's involvement in cover-ups and manipulation, fueling the belief that even bigger secrets are being hidden. Did you know there's a connection between the origin stories of Marvel's Daredevil and the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles? You learn all kinds of random stuff on this channel, right? Apparently, the chemical ooze that blinded Matt Murdock flowed into the sewers and caused the turtles to mutate. Fans of both franchises have spotted similarities, and this isn't surprising. The turtles were created by Eastman and Laird, who have acknowledged paying tribute to Daredevil while writing about Leonardo, Donatello, Michelangelo, and Raphael. I mean, you have Splinter and Stick, you have the foot and the hand, If you're a fan of both, you've known this for a while. According to popular belief, actor John Wilkes Booth assassinated President Lincoln on his own inside Ford's Theater. However, Booth conspired with no fewer than 9 additional co-conspirators, including Mary Surratt, the first woman hanged by the US government. One of the co-conspirators includes George Astaroth, who failed in his assassination attempt on Vice President Andrew Johnson. Meanwhile, co-conspirator Lewis Powell also tried to assassinate Secretary of State William Seward, wounding him badly. You've heard of the fake moon landing theory. But get ready for the next step and learn about the conspiracy theory that the moon isn't even real at all. There are people who genuinely believe the moon isn't real. Some theorists believe that the moon is a government-fabricated distraction to some other theory. Some believe, including a Russian scientist, that the moon may actually be some sort of space station. And some even believe that the reason we actually see the moon is because it's just a massive hologram. What evidence do any of these crazy theories have? Well, none. While climate change is often blamed for the severity of Australia's bushfires, some believe the fires were intentionally set to clear land for a high-speed rail project along the east coast. During the 2019-2020 bushfire season, several people were arrested for arson, and authorities confirmed that some fires were caused by human activity. This led to speculation that the fires weren't entirely a result of natural conditions, but part of an effort to clear land for development. Adding to this theory, plans for a high-speed rail line had been discussed around the same time, and many of the fires occurred in areas where the proposed route would run. Deliberately burning land would make it easier to bypass environmental regulations. So while we have no solid proof linking the fires to the rail project, the combination of the timing and arson arrests has kept this theory very much alive. There's a lot of talk of fake news and the shadowy motives of the mainstream media in today's society. In the case of the Rwandan genocide, there was definitely bias against the Tutsi population. In fact, the Hutu nationalists were encouraged to attack the Tutsi by their local media. Radio Televisión Libre de Mil Colina has been identified as one of the stations involved in this. In fact, it was given the nickname of Radio Genocide. Approximately 800,000 people were killed over 100 days in 1994. Following Germany's surrender in World War II, over 1,600 Nazi scientists were sent to work in the US. In 1946, the scheme, known as Operation Paperclip, was exposed to the media, most notably in the New York Times. Some of these researchers worked on Project MKUltra. Werner von Braun was a well-known former Nazi participant in this program. He made his mark in the US by being part of the moon landing and designing the Jupiter-C rocket that launched America's first satellite. He also became a director within the Development Operations Division of the Army Ballistic Missile Agency. Despite the fact that there are thousands of cancer researchers who are actually looking for a cure for cancer, there are people who think that that cure already exists. Theorists claim that big pharma companies are withholding the cure for cancer from the public to make sure that they keep making profits. Cancer researchers and members of big pharma companies have said multiple times that a quick treatment for cancer would be far more profitable for big pharma and insurance companies than the current cancer treatments that are in place. Elvis Presley's death in 1977 shocked the world, but not everyone believes he's really gone. Some think he faked his death to escape the pressures of fame, and there are a few strange details that keep this theory alive. One odd detail is the spelling of his middle name. On his death certificate, it's spelled Aaron with 2 A's, but on his birth certificate, it's spelled Aaron with 1 A. Some find this inconsistency suspicious, suggesting it could have been a deliberate misdirection. Then there are the sightings. Over the years, many people have claimed to have seen Elvis in different places, whether it's at a Michigan burger joint or even at Graceland. One of the most famous sightings happened at Memphis International Airport, where a man who looked like Elvis bought a one-way ticket to Buenos Aires using the name John Burroughs, an alias Elvis was known to use. Elvis also had a fascination with the FBI and even worked with them on some cases. Some theorists believe this connection might have led him to enter witness protection, which would explain his sudden disappearance. An American football team deflating balls in order to gain an advantage sounds like a wild conspiracy theory, doesn't it? Well, guess what? It's true. The deceptive deflation happened back in 2014 during the AFC Championship game. As a consequence, the New England Patriots were punished, Tom Brady was suspended, and a $1 million fine was imposed. This entry probably should have been right after the CIA hitman, but we felt it needed to shine independently. The CIA revealed their secret weapon capable of causing fatal heart attacks in 1975. It works by firing a little poison dart through clothing, leaving nothing except a tiny red dot on the skin. The dart disintegrates on impact, leaving just a little sting comparable to an insect bite. An autopsy can't reveal the toxin since it deteriorates too fast. As a result, the CIA can carry out assassinations that cannot be linked to them. There are many people who believe that COVID-19 was actually created in a lab in China, which had been disproven by multiple sources, but there are also people who believe that coronavirus was an attempt of biowarfare on the US. Their belief in this theory comes from a supposed hundreds of documents, including confidential reports, emails, and scientific papers, as well as interviews with US State Department officials who have investigated the pandemic's source. How these theorists could have possibly gotten a hold of these classified documents to believe that COVID was a bioweapon is a mystery, but something tells me it's just paranoia, which also can be pretty viral. Operation Infection, a real Soviet disinformation campaign, was launched in the 80s, planting stories that HIV was man-made and deliberately released by the US government. But beyond propaganda, there are several facts that keep conspiracy theorists convinced that there might be some truth to this theory. First, the outbreak of HIV/AIDS disproportionately affected marginalized groups, particularly African Americans and homosexual men. The rapid spread of the virus and the initial government inaction to address it left many feeling abandoned, and led some to believe that it was no accident. Another key factor is the US government's history with unethical medical experiments. From the Tuskegee syphilis study, where African-American men were intentionally left untreated for syphilis, to the secretive MK Ultra experiments, we definitely have historical precedent for unethical experimentation by government agencies. People must have really trusted their TVs back in the 50s, because the game show The $64,000 Question fooled the public into thinking contestants were providing their own answers. The shocking truth was that the game was being manipulated, with certain players encouraged to cheat. $64,000 became a big fat zero after the government became involved and the series was shut down. Unfortunately, this conspiracy theory, which also turned out to be true, redefines the term "make love, not war." One of the non-lethal compounds explored by the US Defense Department to disrupt enemy morale and discipline was the gay bomb. The 1994 study aimed to develop a weapon that would douse opposing troops in female pheromones. The goal was to make soldiers sexually attracted to one another, which would reduce their fighting efficiency. However, it was never pursued. Or so they say. Despite the fact that there are 800,000 deaths and 55 million confirmed infections just in the US alone, there were many, and still are many, that believe that COVID-19 doesn't exist. Whether this belief be based on nothing more than propaganda or just pure fear and ignorance, we're not sure. Despite the mass amount of information to prove that this belief is false, people refuse to believe in any of the evidence. It's genuinely embarrassing how often the World Health Organization has had to go on record and say that COVID-19 is real. This might sound far-fetched, but hear me out. Governments and intelligence agencies have a long history of monitoring online activities. In 2013, Edward Snowden revealed that the NSA was actively collecting and analyzing data from millions of people's online activities. Social media platforms, including Reddit, were included in these surveillance programs, raising concerns about the extent of government monitoring. Then there's the idea of COINTELPRO, a real FBI operation in the 60s and 70s where the agency infiltrated political groups, spread misinformation, and attempted to discredit certain movements. Some also point to the way conspiracy threads evolve on Reddit, how certain topics suddenly gain traction, or how ideas that are getting close to sensitive truth seem to disappear or get flooded with disinformation. It's not too hard to imagine that modern-day tactics could involve digital spaces like Reddit. The Gong Show featured talented individuals performing in front of judges looking to win prizes and avoid the famous gong. Of course, there was a little more to the format than that. You also watched weird people try their luck alongside those participants with genuine talent. Theories that producers deliberately selected gong-worthy contestants were eventually confirmed. Though, was that really a surprise? If everyone who appeared on the Gong Show is talented, well, they wouldn't have much of a show. Yes, your government can manipulate the weather. To some extent, anyway. During the war in Vietnam, the CIA would seed the clouds to increase the amount of rain during the monsoon season. According to the CIA, this technique was used between 1967 and 1972 to wash off roads and cause destructive landslides, preventing North Vietnamese troops from moving their weapons and supplies. Unfortunately, the more recent conspiracy theory that COVID-19 was a hoax isn't the first time in history that people have claimed that a worldwide pandemic was fake. Back during the AIDS epidemic, people claimed that the whole disease was fabricated by the CIA to kill off homosexuals and African Americans. Not only did people believe this, but again, there are still people who believe this. There are even people who believe that the CIA directly injected gay men with AIDS in an effort to wipe them out. The Tasmanian tiger was declared extinct over 80 years ago after the last known specimen died in captivity in 1936. But many believe this carnivorous marsupial may still be lurking in the wilds of Australia. In 2013, a team of cryptozoologists found feces in the wild that they believed came from a Tasmanian tiger. They sent the samples off for DNA testing, confident that a population of around 300 was still roaming the countryside. Though no conclusive results came from the test, it fueled excitement among the believers. Then there's Neil Waters, founder of a Tasmanian tiger awareness group. In 2021, he uploaded grainy footage to YouTube of what he insisted was a Tasmanian tiger. Though scientists remain skeptical, and the official record says there's, quote, no conclusive evidence of the Tasmanian tiger's survival, unexplained sightings continue. In fact, several reports of Tasmanian tiger sightings surface every year, with many coming from credible witnesses, including farmers and park rangers. Or, to put it another way, the popular cartoon Eco Warrior was planted in the series as a metaphor. You see, there wasn't actually a Captain Planet. The hero you saw was, in reality, a symbol of the character's combined powers. He was more a figurehead than an action figure, you would say. The confirmation of this fan theory came from Barbara Pyle, who was the head writer on Captain Planet and the Planeteers. For decades, it was assumed that Hitler committed suicide after World War II. Still, many conspiracy theorists believed it was a sham and that he had slipped away at the last moment. Hitler's skull fragment obtained from the bunker where he supposedly died was in the possession of the Russian authorities. In 2009, Russian authorities conducted testing on the skull fragment. The alarming findings revealed that the skull fragment belonged to a young woman, not a man. Ironically, the tests were conducted to undermine the credibility of the conspiracy theorists claiming he had gone into hiding. We've heard a lot about the COVID-19 conspiracy theories, but this one takes the cake. Bill Gates came under fire not too long ago because the theory started spreading that he was using COVID-19 vaccines to implant microchips into people. What these microchips were supposed to be doing, who knows? Bill Gates commented on these theories, stating, "It's almost hard to deny this stuff because it's so stupid or strange that even to repeat it gives it credibility." When Princess Diana died in a car crash in Paris in 1997, the world mourned. The official explanation is that her driver was speeding and under the influence, which led to the fatal crash. But some believe there's more to the story. Diana was one of the most famous people in the world, with immense influence and a history of conflict with the British royal family. In the months leading up to her death, she was dating Dodi Fayed, the son of billionaire Mohammed Al Fayed. Some believe that certain members of the establishment were uncomfortable with Diana's relationship and the possibility of her marrying into the Fayed family. Then we have the suspicious details. The driver, Henri Paul, was said to be drunk, but several people have claimed that he didn't drink that night. There's also the fact that surveillance cameras in the tunnel where the crash occurred were reportedly turned off or malfunctioned. Moreover, Diana herself predicted her own death. In a letter to her former butler, she wrote that she feared an accident would be staged in her car. How complicit were the media in the terrible story of Jeffrey Epstein? What did news outlets know, and what did they allegedly cover up? We received an answer to some of these questions in 2019 when ABC News journalist Amy Robach was recorded on a microphone she didn't know was live. She wanted to report on Epstein's activities back in 2015, but apparently the station pumped the brakes on the coverage. If the so-called hot mic hadn't been recording, this vital nugget of information might have been lost. Our government has been fascinated by UFOs for a long time, despite years of denial, and even had a program looking for UFOs as late as 2011. The 5-year Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program gathered video and audio evidence of UFOs and built storage facilities to store any alien objects. While the Pentagon denies that such efforts are still taking place, the program's director, Luis Elizondo, claims they are. And if today's list has taught us anything, we'd rather believe Lewis's slip of the tongue than the Pentagon's denial. This theory proposes the idea that the entirety of NASA is no more than a government-created organization to create falsehoods and fabricate myths, like the fact that the Earth is round, or that the stars are far away, and that the sun is real. The people that believe this say there is abundant proof that NASA lies about virtually everything that they say, and that all the photos provided are just CGI. However, the same people that believe this have a difficult time coming up with better proof than "it's just impossible" or "it doesn't make sense." We all know the official story. Jeffrey Epstein died by suicide in his jail cell in 2019 while awaiting trial for sex trafficking. But for a lot of people, that explanation doesn't quite add up. Epstein had ties to some seriously powerful people: princes, politicians, celebrities, and businessmen. That's why some think he knew too much, and that he was silenced before he could reveal anything damaging about those connections. And let's not forget all the convenient coincidences. The guards who were supposed to be watching him, they reportedly fell asleep. And the cameras near his cell? Well, apparently they just stopped working. On top of that, the autopsy revealed broken bones in his neck, injuries that experts say are more common in strangulation than hanging. So while the official ruling is suicide, all these odd details have kept the theory alive that Epstein's death wasn't just a tragic end, but a way to protect some very powerful people. The TV series Lost was one of the most confusing shows in network history. When it ended, the story left more questions than answers. Many believe the characters were killed in the plane crash, which opened the series, and that the island existed as a form of purgatory. This fan theory hasn't been confirmed by the creators, but what they did say was that the characters definitely died on the island, just not from the crash. Furthermore, some of what we watched was set in purgatory, specifically the famous flash sideways sequences.